Hey guys, this will be video 8 for the how to design build a custom Explorer replica and paint it sapphire blue and then install shark fin mother of pearl inlays atop a maple fretboard that is under that tape, and then bind it and try to finish the guitar. So anyway, I had mentioned in the last video, which was a couple of weeks back, how they look kind of rough as they're coming together. I can always see the beauty of the guitar and whatnot, but anyway, it still looks rough on film or on camera. But I'm gonna cheat a little bit in a little while, and we're gonna use a little bit of mineral spirits and show what this guitar should look like. But this video is also going to be intentionally put together for the client, because he and I, we were talking about, he asked me about, hey, are we going to finish that maple fretboard? And I had mentioned very early in the job that, yeah, we definitely need to put some sort of finish on the fretboard. And I most likely would recommend doing like a French polish with, but I can do it with a Nitro Cellulose lacquer. And I know that looks really like amber, but once you put it on this maple, you can hardly even tell. You'd be shocked how dark you have to tint lacquer in order to get it to really, come alive and be really dark. And we don't want that. And I know that even the client doesn't want that. I certainly don't want that. I know the client doesn't want that either. And because I don't want anything that will take away from the shark fin. And I'm about to pull this tape off, and we're actually going to see the fretboard. We're going to see all the binding work, and I'm going to talk about how I rolled the binding just into the lower, which was pre-painted. Which I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you know what you're doing. It's a really difficult job. I'm gonna stop because I'll sound like I'm complaining, because I'm not complaining, but I just want to let you know that whatever you see here, don't think it was really easy to achieve. And I would kind of recommend just finishing your whole guitar build and then taping it off and then just painting it after that, and then remove the tape and then blend everything in from there. So anyway, so let's do this. Let's do a little bit of a flyby. Again, it's still rough, and I slipped up just a little bit. I was doing some wet sanding earlier, and I did. I got a little bit too thin on the top up there, top edge up there. So I got to tint that with some sapphire and darken it up a little bit, but she'll be fine. And you should be able to see how it's beginning to really flatten out. And let's see what happens when we put a little bit of mineral spirits on it. Let me just get the mineral spirits cloth here on the table, and then let's see if, I don't know if I'm going to wet it just yet. Let me just keep talking about it, and then I'm going to wet it a little bit with the mineral spirits, and you'll see how quickly it'll start glowing. Because right now it's just buffed to let's see if it's wet. I think it's wet sanded up to 800 grit. I think it might. No, it's a worn out 600. So when I say worn out, it's just been used a lot for wet sanding. So it's kind of like the equivalent of 800 to 1,000 grit. And then, and this is just in preparation for where you'd be doing all your final waxing. And you can see how there's still some shiny spots showing up right there. I'm torn between whether or not I want to try to continue sanding off this clear coat, because right now this is all clear coat that you're looking at. Because the danger you could run into is as you're doing this wet sanding and everything is going great, and then all of a sudden you make 5 or 6 passes and you just went through your clear coat, and now you hit your color and you don't realize it, because everything about what you're doing is wet and you can't really see it. So you're thinking, oh yeah, this is beautiful, it's going great, I'm sanding, blah 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 blah, and then all of a sudden you sand off some of the really beautiful blue. So I say that to say this. I think I'm going to shoot just one more really fine mist of clear, because I did a hell of a lot of wet sanding today. I took off a lot of mill thickness, and so much so that it got a little bit dangerous. So well, and that's why I brought up, I actually went through it a little bit right there on that top corner, which is not that big of a deal because once I touch it up, this is just building the guitar. This is what happens, because the whole idea is you're trying to, get the guitar finished, but then also maintain the original color that you put in there as well. See how quickly that mineral spirits dries out? Doesn't last very long. But this will give you an idea of what the guitar is going to look like once I get it wet sanded with the 1500 grit and then waxed. I wasn't planning on waxing it, but I can't help it. This thing's so beautiful. I'm going to go ahead and wax it a couple of times. There's your binding, your ivory. No, I'm sorry, that's parchment. That is parchment from All Parts. And it is a 60 thousandths binding in its thickness, which is right at about 1/16 of an inch thick. And it is rolled from the backside lower up into the fretboard a little bit. And I'll talk about this briefly. Typically, what happens is when you're doing a real drastic dark color like that, it's cool to tape off your fretboard and then do a real fine taping below it, and then just come in with like a bamboo skewer with a little bit of your colored Nitro Cellulose lacquer, and just pour it atop that little join, and then let it dry for a day or two, and then do a little bit of feather sanding so that once you start removing your tapes, you're assured that you got a beautiful join from the lower to that binding. And primarily the main reason I had to do that is because this was already painted sapphire blue before I even put the fretboard down, because the fretboard received the parchment binding atop the fretboard jig. Okay. And then obviously because it had the tape on it, once I didn't want to remove the tape up here, because after I got all the blue touched up, then I was coming in with Nitro Cellulose clear and spraying the top coat, the clear coats, and then actually letting it soak into the join between the binding and the lower a little bit, and just make certain that I had a real nice transition there. And it's pretty close. I'm going to get one. It's going to get 1 or 2 real thin coats of clear tomorrow, a real fine, real thin coats, and then that'll be ready to be drilled and receive the dots, the color for the dots. And I kind of prefer to do just a black dot. I had thought about mixing up some epoxy and tinting it blue, the sapphire blue, and doing blue dots, which would probably be pretty cool, but it's a lot of extra work. So I just want to let you know, Art, I'm kind of at a point to where I need, I know you want to get the guitar as well, but there's a part of me, it's like the blue would kind of be cool, but I probably would recommend we just go with black dots. But, let me know what you think about that. Because when I do the dots, it'll be mixed up epoxy anyway. It'll be tinted with a black. So it's not like I'll be putting little plastic black dots in there. I'll be actually hand mixing those epoxy dots. Okay, I wasn't planning on talking about that. But I was just thinking, I thought, man, this would be a great opportunity to just do the sapphire blue dots as well. Might be kind of cool. So, all right. Let's wipe this a little bit with some lacquer. I mean, just never wipe it with lacquer. Mineral spirits. And what you want to do is check right here, make certain you're not getting any blue. If you're getting any blue on your cloth, back up and punt, because you're about to get yourself in trouble. That's all clear coat. So I think it's got probably about 4 or 5 really thin coats of clear Nitro Cellulose lacquer to seal in the color, and really beautiful. It's going to dry out really fast, so let me just kind of hold it here in the light, and then what I'm trying to do is do kind of like a mock-up of what the guitar will look like once it's finished, and waxed. Well, I think I've already talked about that. Yeah, I did. Okay, it's a beautiful, beautiful color. Just stunning. Love it. and it's cool because it has the white primer under it, and it's it's uh, it's a pretty difficult finish to pull off because you're well. Let me back up. No, it's not because because it's a fairly dark color, but even though it's real dark, that it stays very transparent even through the glass. So it's just a beautiful, beautiful color. I love it. I'm gonna try to hold it in the camera where I can do a screenshot, and that'll show the guitar kind of what it'll look like once it's finished. Because as I had mentioned in the beginning of the video, it's really frustrating doing these videos because the guitar, they look so rough the whole time, the whole time. And if you're working for a client that's never seen a guitar as it's being built, hell, it would probably scare them. They'd probably think, oh my God, this thing's never going to come together. But I think it definitely is. It's a beautiful, beautiful guitar, light as a feather. Might do some weight analysis in a little while if I can remember. So let's not drop it. Let's lay it back down. And then clean this top a little bit. Check, make sure it's clear. Never use any acetone or lacquer thinner. You'll put yourself about 3 weeks behind. And that's one of the things that really spooked me. I'll go ahead. I don't have a problem talking about this because I don't mind. This was not a mistake, but it could have turned into a mistake very, very quickly. This blue is such a thin, semi-transparent color that when I was shooting my clear, I got a little bit overzealous when I was spraying this side right here, and the clear sagged just a little, just enough to pull the blue down a little bit, and it created a bit of a real light blue racing stripe, like a little pinstripe right there. I'll be able to touch it up with just by shooting. I'll have to do some tape. I'll tape off the binding again, and then I'll shoot 1 or 2 shots of the blue, sand it with like some 800, buff it, and then shoot it with a little bit more clear. But that could get you in major, major trouble if you were like painting this body in your booth and you're trying to get a lot of heavy coverage on it, and then all of a sudden you get this god awful wave and it just pulls the blue down from a certain area. And I'm being dramatic because that would be a nightmarish situation where you would be sanding off most of it and you would be starting over, redoing the whole back. Okay, so anyway, it's not for the faint of heart doing this color. And like I had mentioned, I think in video 6 or 7, maybe 8. I mean, no, this is video 8. Video 7. I knew it was going to be a difficult finish to do, and I was just kind of curious about diving into it and pulling it off. But I'm very happy with it. So let me check the time. 13. Is it 13 minutes? 30 seconds. Let's talk about doing some maple stain. Let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and get this off in real time. I'm just going to let the camera roll because, I haven't done a video related to this guitar in quite a while. It's been a couple of weeks. So I'll just kind of show you what your next step would be. Now the fretboard is finished. It has been sanded up to 1500 grit, actually wet sanded, buffed to a beautiful, beautiful finish, and it was buffed so well that I could actually see my reflection in it. Now, after I pull this tape off, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to remain that shiny. This is the first time I've seen it since I did all the clear. And I wouldn't recommend, don't try to save this tape and reuse it, because now that I've pulled it off, I've kind of already lost the definition of the tape. Sorry if that's not on the camera, but I gotta Gotta do the job. Stunning guitar. Okay, let's see if there's any tape residue on there, or if it is as beautiful as I see here. A lot of times, I really love like the matte finish on guitars, especially if I do a black guitar. Man, I love doing a matte finish. So let's do a flyby. Beautiful. And this is what I meant, Art, by the maple is so beautiful, just is natural and light. Just kind of put it there and let you take it all in. I really don't think we need to go. I don't think we need to change the color too much. And I'm not going to do any of this clear cut until you see this video, because in a little while I'm going to do some samples and I'm going to do various steps of different shades, different tints of amber, and then I'm going to let you say, hey, yeah, let's go with the one in the middle, or let's go with or you might tell me, hey, no, let's go with the really darker, or the darker. I'm not going to go, like the roasted look, but let me see if I can find the sheen. Now it took off. It took off the sheen. So let me wipe it with mineral spirits rag. Where's that cloth? As you can tell, I don't have a set list to go over with this video at all. But tell you what, let's do this. Let me do the clear paint thinner. Let me think what I'm about to do. Yeah, because I'm not going to do any finish work on this fretboard until Art sees it and tells me what he wants to see. What you see right now, this is what the guitar would look like if I just come in and do a French polish with Nitro Cellulose lacquer that is clear, has no tint at all. And if you wanted to know the truth, that right there in its natural state is really stunning. And with just the traditional clear nitro, sorry, I'm using a paper towel, so it's going to leave a little bit of a little bit of debris on there. But even the clear nitro cellulose lacquer would warm up a little bit over time. Not much. It would stay fairly clear, but that's really beautiful. And what does that tell you? If you use a really choice luthier grade wood species on everything that you do, like you're doing clear cut work, whether it's a body or a fretboard or all that jazz, or overlay, if you go with a really high quality piece of species of wood, you won't have to do a lot of faux work, FAUX. Okay, you won't have to do a lot of, or as a buddy of mine used to say, frou-frou. You don't have to do any frou-frou work. So, you don't have to jazz it up or anything. So, in its natural state, with just like a clear oil on it, or like if you oiled it, this is what you could expect to see, just kind of a warm maple. And it's really beautiful. But nonetheless, I am going to do a little bit of French polishing on here with the lacquer that has some amber in it, and we'll let Art decide what he wants his guitar to look like. And for added drama, let me see if I can wipe that top again, so you can really get an idea of what this guitar will look like once it's built up. Yeah, man. Beautiful. Still rough, once I do the 1500 grit sanding though, and then the wax work, shoot, man, it should be really beautiful. Let's do a quick flyby before that stuff dries. It might not have been a very good idea. I like it. Okay, I'm wasting time. And you're happy with your project when you see it, and you kind of start grieving a little bit because you know, oh man, I wish I could keep it for a week or two and show it to all my buddies and you know, take it up to Nashville. But it's also really exciting. I get more enjoyment out of getting them boxed up and shipped off than I do keeping them and playing with them. But this is a beautiful guitar. Okay, let's do a little bit of French polishing. And what is French polishing? Look it up, read about it. It's basically how they used to finish all the old violins, but they used a shellac. And I don't know if they actually added any sort of ambers. They obviously didn't have things like this. I'm talking about like back in the when did they start building violins? 1400s maybe, 1500s. I don't know. I should know that, but I know it wasn't in the early 80s. So if they didn't have the trans tint and all this material right here, so they were just relying on the natural beauty of the woods to just come alive. But the more they applied this finish, the warmer and more protected the wood became. However, the theory about building a violin, a cello, or probably even an upright bass was you only want enough material on there to seal that wood. And they would actually apply the shellac, rub it on, and let it dry. And then they would take really fine razor blades and they would scrape off most of the material that they applied, because they were just rather than they didn't have aluminum oxide sandpaper either, so they were relying on a very sharp blade to help them achieve their finish, and probably using some sort of wool cloth to do the rubbing. But nonetheless, that's basically French polishing. And you can do like a cowboy's version of French polishing with just I'm going to use paper towel here only because I'm just doing a demo, but I would not use a paper towel on doing the French polishing up there. I would use like a real soft, probably like a bamboo cloth. And there is a you-know-what fly in here. I tried to kill the little you-know-what a little while ago and it got away from me. Let's see if that changes the color. See, nothing at all. Didn't even, just made a fool out of me. But you can see what I'm saying, that how much color there is right there, and it really didn't even pick up in here. However, if art likes that real natural maple look, we could go with this right here and probably be safe that we wouldn't be changing the color of the maple unless I did a coat like real wet and let it dry, and then came back 15 minutes later, did another wet coat, really dry, and then let it dry and start building up all these coats, then it would definitely start getting a little bit warmer. So as you can see, didn't really change it much, but it did seal it. Now let's see what happens to the end grain. The end grain is probably going to show the true color. Yeah, not too much. But on that note, if you're building an archtop guitar or a violin, you have to be extremely careful, like where the top is arched and where you come into the curvature, or the recurve, you will actually get into the end grain. And if you come in and try to do too much artificial antique finishing, all of the dark tint that you might have mixed up might be beautiful in this glass, but then once you start rubbing it on your arched top, and especially if it's a very pronounced top, like a violin where it has a real pronounced pinch right here, you'll get some really nasty discoloration in the end grain, or it'll be blotchy, and that's hard to correct. So always work your way to the finish line and be very patient about your colors. And if anything, well, I'm not going to start talking about building jazz guitars because it has nothing to do with this, because what we're trying to do is help Art determine, whether he wants a dark fretboard or a natural fretboard. And I'm going to get kind of extreme here. I'm just going to put a drop in here and boom, let it turn a real deep color. One thing I will say, if you are if you're, let's say you're building like a Les Paul, 59 Les Paul replica, and you want to do the real pretty honey amber top, um, what I would recommend is use denatured alcohol. Don't use the lacquer. Use a denatured alcohol and put the tint color that you want in a real soft cloth. Don't use the paper towel, but wash, stain the whole top with a denatured alcohol, a tinted denatured alcohol. If you do that, the grain will not raise, it will not fur up. And then once you get your color, then spray a seal coat. But if you were, because you can add this to a water, you could just do like a water-based stain. But if you do that and then you stain with a water-based stain, the wood will get furry on you. So that applies here as well. Why? Because I've already buffed this fretboard to 1500 grit. I mean, I had a mirror reflection, and I know that once I come in here and start doing this French polish rubbing on here before I install the frets, uh, if I were using the denatured alcohol stain or the lacquer based stain, it's not going to fur up on me. But if I were using a water-based stain, every bit of the beautiful buff work that I had done, I would lose it. This wood would, the grain would open up again, and it would get really furry. And then you'd have to sand it, and it'd be a bit of a nightmare. So I wasn't really prepared to talk about violins, archtop Les Pauls, but those are just things that you kind of need to know. Considerably darker, but what's going to shock you is how little it changes. See, even with like one drop in there, how the end grain might get a little bit darker. And it's so much so that actually when I built this last 59 Les Paul replica, I actually had to drop a drop of mahogany in there, and it turned it into like a dark tea. It looked like dark tea. You could barely even see through it. But then once I did all my stain work, it was positively beautiful. So you can see, let me see if I can just do a little bit of a drip here. And if I say anything that is so important, it is, I've already mentioned it, but okay, see that right there? See how quickly it'll start looking fake? And it did not take much at all. So that's typically the mistake most people make. They have the color they want to see in the bottle or in their canister, but then they start trying to apply it to their piece, and it's just they lose control, especially if you're spraying. But if you let that soak in for 5 or 10 minutes and then come in and start rubbing it, well, then that's where you're doing kind of like the French polish finish. And typically, you can you could add a little bit of, never mind, I shouldn't have brought that up. I'm thinking of something different. I was going to say you could add some boiled linseed oil to that, but you don't want to be adding linseed oil to your lacquer. If you were just rubbing it with an oil and a shellac, I believe you can add linseed oil to shellac. I may be wrong about that, but yeah. Now see, I can see the color change in that, and personally, I think that's probably that. To me, that would be the threshold. I wouldn't want to go any darker than that. And let's try to put it up against some. It doesn't look much different. But if you see right there, see the yellow. If you weren't careful, if you kept chasing after a more antique look, you might shock yourself and realize you crossed that threshold a little bit too quickly. And then this is not something, once you get a dark color, that you want to try to start stripping down to a lighter color. This is definitely a job that you want to work up to that finished target. Okay. So I hope this is an okay video, because again, I really had not prepared for this conversation at all, if you want to know the truth. Well, yeah, I had thought about it, and I I tell you what I had thought of. I had thought of, it reminded me of war stories of when I first started building guitars professionally back in the early 2000s, where I was trying to come out of the gate with these guitars that looked really old and antique, which a lot of us made that mistake in the early 2000s. And typically, what happened, they all ended up turning like a burnt orange, funky brown. They were horrible. They were just way too dark. They looked so fake. And see how, and I wouldn't recommend doing this if you know, I wouldn't have a problem doing this if you had a glove on, but I wouldn't recommend, that's not really good. That's not healthy at all. But you can see how the French polishing, if you were using your, just your finger, a lot of times I will do polish work with the stuff right here. Renaissance micro crystalline wax polish. That I don't have a problem getting making contact with my skin, but see how it left a lot of the color in there, an enormous amount, by using the rag to do the polish work. The rag, well, see, it dried, so it left it fairly dark. So just kind of be thinking about what you're beginning to see here, Art. And if you like that right there, just let me know that was the one where you started talking about the wax polish. But to me personally, see how directly in that light it wasn't too bad. But I'm looking at that right there, and I would say that would be the threshold. I wouldn't recommend going any darker than that. And me personally, I really think that's too dark. I think that's too much because it proves to me I've worked with enough natural maple to realize that yeah, that's an artificial color right there. Okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit darker on this just so that you can see it. But I think we achieved it in the last go around. And what's amazing is when I did that application with my finger, it didn't soak up a lot of the color. But let's see what happens here if we, typically what will happen if you apply some more, it's not, and you start using the cloth, as you can see, that's way too dark. That's what I was talking about where people get in trouble. There's that fly. They try to achieve a vintage look and they just run it. So typically what's going to happen right here, that should act as a stripper. Yeah, it did. See, it stripped that off where I had applied it with my finger because it was still a hot, wet chemical. And then what would happen here, if I have to pause this camera, kill that fly, I'm definitely going to. But at this point right here, see, that's still too dark. Okay. But I could sand it a little bit, but I think this should be enough information to let Art know that yeah, okay, well then yeah, we can achieve a vintage color if we want. But even though this might look good in front of they call it halogen light, once you get it over here in an amber light, it's way, I don't know, is that in the camera? It's way too yellow, way too yellow. Okay. So I would say probably the second step with that, this mix is okay, but only apply maybe one coat of it, you know, and then after it dries a little bit, well, let me back up. The whole idea of French polishing is to not let it build any sort of mill thickness at all, zero mill thickness. You want to be the natural wood, but just you know, sealed a little bit with some color. All right, let me check the time. 34 minutes. Again, I don't. This is not a video that I've ever done for anyone. So because typically when I'm doing something like that, I'm just I'm in my own private environment. I'm looking at what's in front of me, and I'm thinking about contrasting colors and things like that. And if it were my guitar, you know, where am I going to be playing it? What do I want to see? et cetera, et cetera. But when you're building a guitar for a client, I may have not even finished what I was talking about earlier, but I've never met Art, and we've only had brief conversations about um, his play, what he was intending to do with the guitar, as far as whether he plays indoors, outdoors, whether he's a professional musician, does he tour, things like that, does he do photo shoots with a band and stuff like that. And I didn't sense that he's a pro touring guitarist. And a lot of times I know to keep my mouth shut because that's really none of my business. But if it was a guitar where he was going to do photo shoots with it and mug shots, then yeah, those things are pretty important because you might want it to look like an authentic 1958 Explorer replica or a Les Paul replica or something like that. And it's really important that you don't do that artificial finish because it'll scream amateur very quickly, very quickly. Okay, so let me check the time again. I'm gonna pause briefly. I'm gonna look at the guitar and think about what I might need to talk about because um, sometimes when I do these videos, I'm worried about, oh God, I need to stop talking about this. I'm spending too much time. But then I realize that once I watch the video, it's like, no, those are the things that you need to talk about when you're getting ready to change the whole fretboard. So, but I do want to make certain that I end the video and not ramble, but obviously make some good ground as far as for the client. So let me pause and get the table cleaned up, and we'll go from there. Okay, should be able to finish within a few minutes here. And I don't think I mentioned it, but if you lose control and you get too dark, just come in with some straight lacquer thinner, not very wet, but just saturated enough to strip off the finish and start over. Um, be careful with the binding though, because the lacquer thinner will distort the binding if you like if this had binding right here and you rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and rubbed and we're cleaning that right there, you'll round over that binding. And I'm glad I brought that up because the whole idea about the surface of the fretboard is you want the binding to be flat and radiused with the surface of the binding, with the surface of the fretboard. Because I don't have any binding here other than, well, I got some binding right here. um, you want to protect this very sharp edge. Right now, this radius is a 12-inch radius. As it comes over to this corner right here, I've been paying a lot of attention to making certain that I don't let that get rounded over. Whether I'm doing sanding work, from the backside, like if I'm blending, well, and I was blending this whole backside over, blending the binding into the lower. I've already talked about this, but when I got up to here, I did not roll yet. I'm so glad I thought of this. You do not do your rolling into the top until your frets are completely installed and finished. And obviously, they're going to be you're eventually going to have them trimmed to the edge, and you could do a little bit of bevel work, but don't worry about doing your finish beveling until all of your frets are installed. You're nice and level. You're nice and true, and then you're ready to roll the edges with respect to a certain width trapezoidal path from the top of the frets, from the top of the first fret up to the finished 22nd fret. You're going to have a certain dimension platform that is trapezoidal, just as the fretboard is, and that's obvious. We all know that, but you want to make certain that don't overshoot that bounds. If you overshoot and you taper too much, that is an enormous amount of work to redo. You'll be removing frets, and you'll be redoing the fret job in order to get it under control. I won't be because I've done this so long. I know exactly what I'm doing. But I'm working with a 1 in 23/32 nut width, and that's fairly wide, but that's no excuse to come in here with a really steep pitch. I don't have a problem rolling into the fret and even rolling the edge of the fret off. And my fretwork will be such that it's of jazz guitar standards. You won't be hanging on anything. So, but then I have a tendency. I don't pitch very much. I just dress them properly so that they're sweet and comfortable to play. And I've never had anybody complain. So, and I'm sitting here doing air guitar, but nonetheless, you want to make certain that that binding ledge right there is very flat, and that there's a very pronounced corner, and then we'll remove that material and round it in later on after the frets are in. But I did have to go ahead and do, yeah, this is pretty much the job back here, because see, I feel nothing, and if I had a thumbnail there, I could hang on it, or couldn't hang on it, because it's finished on the back, in other words, and it's even had a few coats of clear coat there, as I talked about already. So now I'm being redundant, but very important that but before you do that stain, oh, I know I brought it up. Before you do all this really pretty stain work, well, you got to make certain that this fretboard is completely finished. And at that juncture in the job, when you're getting ready to do all this finish work, you got to come in here and just triple check that you're actually nice and true. And I'm not going to, I'll try to see if I can show it in the camera if I can. Yeah, I should be able to hold it like that, not damage anything. But your fretboard should be perfectly flat, and there should be, if you did a really good job building your guitar, the truss rod will be under no tension. It'll be neutral, and it won't be any reverse tension or any forward tension. Okay, should be neutral, and that's exactly what I've got here. I've got a neutral truss rod and a precision. Let me try to do this without dropping anything. And I got a precision flat fretboard. No surprise. So now don't let it spook you if you build your guitar and you have to have a little bit of forward or back relief, to get to the finish line, because that's what the double adjustable truss rods are for, to help you out. And one thing that may happen, if you got your frets in and they were just a little bit too tight, well, it's not going to be a problem up here, but it will very quickly turn into a problem out here if your frets are too tight and you continue to work it in. What will happen, it will actually start to bow the entire neck. They're unbelievably, there's a lot of tension that goes on there if you get way out of control, and that neck will start going back. If you have the forward adjustable truss rod, you can chase it back to where it needs to be, but you might get yourself in trouble. So just try to have a neutral fretboard and make certain that the curve on your fret saw, just order your fretboard. Okay, just order your fretboard from a company that knows what they're doing, and then buy your frets from that exact same company that machined your fret slots, and it'll be idiot proof. Okay, I shouldn't have even brought that up. So but I only have one horror story that I could tell about that, and that was from like close to 30 years ago. But I learned my lesson. I got some frets in a neck once that was too tight, and barely got it under control. All right. So I talked about radius in the fretboard, and at this point, I know I'm perfectly true. I know now that since I got that tape off of there, I'm actually going to come in here now I'm going to contradict what I said. I'm going to come in here with just a little bit of lacquer thinner, and I'm going to clean that. Well, no, I won't have to, because I just cleaned it off with the mineral spirits. So I'll make certain that I don't have any tape residue on there, and I probably will hit it once or twice with some lacquer thinner. And then I will re-sand this fretboard up to 1500 grit, and it will be a mirror reflection. And then I'll do whatever finish work that Art wants, and then should be ready to install frets. Okay. All right, so I appreciate you guys dropping in. I hope it was an okay video. It's probably kind of chaotic, probably kind of boring for most of you, but sometimes building guitars is just that, and it's one of those things where they truly don't come together until the pretty much the end of the job. So appreciate you guys dropping in, and I'll see you in the next video.